One of the things I realized when I was talking to Dorian is that as incredible as he was a champion, he was also incredibly knowledgeable. And I know to this day he trains a lot of athletes, but his knowledge of the body, of the stress systems, of the nutrition, of the recovery protocols was incredible when we dove deep into it. And he would tell me, he said, Brian, you don't understand. There was no internet back then. I had no coach. All I had was my own experimentation, my own log books, and maybe a couple magazines or a passed around black and white book, that I might have. And now I'm thinking about your era, Lee. 8 years earlier, you must have had even less. And I know you didn't have a coach. Can you walk through some of the young guys these days as to what it was like back then, having to discover it for yourself and actually really create the science yourself?
Yes, it was during an era in which there was very little information out there. You had your magazines like Muscle and Fitness, then you had Iron Man, you had Muscle Training Illustrated, very, very few. And during that time, the magazines mainly consisted of training and nutrition. It wasn't as commercialized as you see them now. So it was all about real good quality knowledge. And then the other thing that was very good, I know growing up in my hometown, you would find some of the older guys in the gym, and they would share with you different training principles. Okay, you want to do that. You don't want to do this. Okay, that's too much weight you're using. So those kinds of tips and principles that was handed down through the generations helped me to become the person that I am today, as far as my knowledge of training, knowledge of nutrition. I mean, at the age of 11 years old, I asked my parents for a set of weights, for Christmas, and they got them for me. And from inside of that little package of weights, there was a Charles Atlas book that had the basic principles of training, maybe one exercise per body part, the foundational exercises. And from those foundational exercises, everything else grew. But I stayed true to the principles that I had read there, which also matched up to the principles that was being given to me by some of the other senior weightlifters that I met at the YMCA. I met at some of the other gyms, such as Nautilus Fitness Centers and those kinds of things during that era. And then what I read in the magazine, programs handed down by Robbie Robertson, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Pete Grimkowski, Albert Beckles, which is from Great Britain, and, Roy Callender, a lot of the different guys, Franco Colombo, who created these programs. And they were true to the science of it. It wasn't any craziness, and you didn't see what is called coaches helping you. These were guys who trained together. They had training partners. And so I implemented the tools of what I had learned from looking into and studying their exercise routines and so forth. And I entered my first bodybuilding show when I was 16 years old. Did very well, didn't win, didn't place, but I was told by the judge, you got a lot of great potential. And I continued to follow those principles. I learned as much as I could about nutrition through reading the magazines. I mean, I grew up in the country where, sweet potatoes and yams was the mainstay. So it was pinto beans, so it was corn, so it was chicken, so it was eggs. So all of the good quality nutrients were there from day one, just from from growing up, from where I'm from. And so by implementing the training principles, good basic nutritional principles, I was able to imitate what I had read about, and my physique continued to grow and get better and better. So by the time I was 18, I entered my first regional show, which, let's back up. When I was 16, I entered my first show, the Mr. South Carolina. Didn't place, as I mentioned earlier, but I did very well. A couple of years later, I entered the Mr. Palmetto, won the show at the age of 18. I beat guys who was in their 30s and in their 40s. And then I went on to win the Mr. South. And again, at age 18. So because of having great information, because of following very good nutritional guidelines, I was able to super exceed guys who was older than me because of my willingness or my desire to follow the science that had been handed down to me by some of the legends of bodybuilding.
So you were eating whole foods back in the day before it became a thing and a whole marketplace you go to back in the day. That's what you grew up on, being in the country.
Exactly. I mean, that's the way we ate. My grandpa had had cows, he had pigs, he had chickens, he had all of that. So my food was organic and grown right from the land. And, nothing's changed as far as that's concerned. We don't say protein, carbohydrate, fats. Now they say micros and macros. It's the same thing. Tomatoes. They just changed the name a little bit. And that's basically it. And no, we didn't have coaches. Didn't need coaches. We had training partners. We say, okay, man, you look a little bit flat today. So you need to increase your carbs a bit. So we knew what carbohydrates are the life force of the physique to get a nice pump. Protein was there to repair cell and tissue and be a good quality muscle. If you have more protein and not carbohydrates, then you're not going to fill out and develop as you should. So it's got to be a happy medium there. So the science of writing down, we had this little tablet where we would write down what we ate in the course of a day, breakfast, lunch, dinner, how many grams of protein, how many grams of carbohydrate. So that as we look better, we were able to go back and figure out why we were looking better. If we looked a bit flat, we could go back scientifically and say, oh man, look, I've only had 100 grams of carbs and I feel a bit sluggish. So guess what? I need to increase my carbohydrate intake. Oh man, I only had 5 glasses of water today. I need to go back and add more water. So we experimented with nutrition. We experimented with training, not just training and nutrition just pulled out of the sky, but by the guidelines that had been handed down by those before us. I didn't make Lee Haney, not by myself. Neither did Dorian make Dorian by himself. But we did have to find out what worked good in our bodies individually, what made us feel good, what allowed us to grow better and recover better. Those are things that only you individually can know through nutrition. Nobody can do that and say, bam, that's what you need 100%, because they don't know, because they are not in your body. You're in your own body.